Good afternoon. For those who know of me and know of the many platforms I have created here in YouTube since February, this last February, Chinese New Year, where I have started speaking on 3 to 4 subjects. Number one is about the psychology of round and square. The psychology of round and square is a counseling methodology that can be used in any languages. Um, the psychology of round and square started in about 5 years ago. It is really coming through a 45 years, the kind of maturation from my degree, my master's degree in counseling psychology in 1974, 75, and launching it in 1976. It is called the 3 C's. And basically, we talk about three of the cultural spheres. Let me explain this to you in a very simple manner. At this stage, I'm not using any other aids other than the fact that you can see in my website much of my graphic work in the use of Canva are very open to the public. The 3 C's, what I have is the communication dynamics, is an adaptation of the transactional analysis in 1974. When I had that visual graphics of the Freudian adaptation from the ego, superego, and id to the adult, parent, and child transactions by Eric Burns, I have modified that and reshaping instead of only the three round spheres, I call it, or these transactions, I have modified that from round to square, depending on the dynamic of our transactions. When we are engaged, we are round to round. Maybe a coach talking down to a smaller round of a student, player, teacher, vice versa. But the only time when we are changing the dynamics is when we are questioning, we are doubting what is being presented to us. You may use the Freudian development called the defense mechanism. So it becomes square. In other words, we get along very well, but something might come to a subject matter, maybe politics, maybe you're Republican, I'm a Democrat, or vice versa. You have a little bit of hesitation. Well, we better not, whatever the secondary issues. Let's remember very well that we have 60,000 transmissions in our emission of sensors and receiving as well. So this is adding to the scientific side of the communications. I just want to briefly talk about the 3 C's. Repeating in this communication dynamics is about how we relay and talking between me and my students and my counselee. And then we have the communication analytica, which is the analysis using this round and square and the triangle to determine what comes in, how do we speak, how we perceive our reception. Is it a round, is it a square, or is it a triangle, which is meaning more hostility? It's very simple to learn. And the reason for such developments, where I think is coming after 50 years or more and 75 years from the time of the psychology or Western psychology from Europe to the US, and becoming where I acquired this concept, is to be able to teach and do counseling worldwide in any language. So that it become a universal language after 40 some years with education, and then with the business engagement in the last 45 years globally, with our business involving the colored gemstones, from mining to processing to design to jewelry, involving Europe, Asia, Hong Kong as our base, with the camps cutting in Thailand, in even Sri Lanka, Korea, and eventually the consolidation back into Guangdong and just north of Hong Kong. That is my cross-cultural engagement, where 90% of my business with Brazil. So my fluency with the Portuguese from the early teenagers, from 62 to 67, it became even more affluent, more fluent, because of 45 years with Brazil, and then Spanish and subsequent Italian. The 5-language background had given me a much more of enrichment of my focus on cross-cultural psychology. But this subject today, you're welcome to look at other tapes I have done, and I will continue explaining what is that I'm trying to do with the Cross Cultural Institute, and even the platform we are using today. We're actually going back to the old ancient Greek and Chinese. The orators talk about Homer, Iliad and Odyssey. He told stories, even Plato and Socrates. And then the scribes and the disciples write no less than the New Testament and Bible, which was written almost 150 years, 200 years later, after the passing of Jesus or Christ in that time. But today we are very lucky. I am talking today, and with what I'm developing with my own platform called the Open Books. Literally, this is a book. We're doing a chapter or doing a paragraph or a page, depending how this paragraph of this particular subject matter we're talking about cross-culturally. I am mentioning today, my focus is on Bruce Lee and Chinese Americans. And I'm trying to present how some of the cultural gaps, cultural dissonance, and how the many discrepancies when people meeting up from different ethnic groups, there are good moments, and they're also oftentimes, because of linguistic barrier, they're presenting some kind of discrepancy. I will not be the only one to speak of this subject matter. But then again, let me explain my platform. We can speak openly, and I'm willing to even make some mistakes here and there. But because the presentation in the next round of the development, be that YouTube or our own platform, this presentation will be taken down like CC in multiple languages. The entire narration will be typewritten, still alive electronically, and inserting into Open Books. It's very simple. You can have access to this subject matter and say Bruce Lee, Chinese American, Paul Yee, or CCI, whatsoever access to this particular subject matter. And in the document, for those who signed in, you are welcome to come to the subject matter and be in that particular paragraph, or at that point you think you can add on to the subject matter. Insert, comment. We can use in different ink and highlight to be positive, negative, or addition to the comment, because we are all traveling in this world observing events. So with what I'm developing, what I'm envisioning in the future, I'm almost engaged daily with a Gemini, with a ChatGPT, and also with Claude. And I have every intention to be engaged in the different platforms in Portuguese and Spanish, Italian, and Chinese, which will come. But what is more important in the next round of the exchange that we have here, based on maybe slightly every sentence with a slight pause, most likely in the next year or so, this speaking stage will become into 160 languages. This will be very much enriching. What is the point? What is the whole subject matter? Is we are all learning. Knowledge is what we are all looking for. What is dynamic about the AI enriched enhancing is the quantum algorithm, is the speed of tabulation. So when I'm putting this into a text, and by our access, like ChatGPT, on the subject matter, you can have multiple reply, because we are moving from this present day communication format that's being modified by these new technologies in the digital age. We are also heading into a future. Actually, it's not future, it's present now. It's called the spatial web. What is spatial web? If you're looking back by what we are talking in my next few minutes, we talk about the Chinese presence in North America, how they came, when they came, why they came. We all know about the Chinese coming over to the US first for the gold rush, San Francisco. And then the next round, when the gold rush is over, they were used to aid to build the railroad system. And this is just one part of the Asian migration coming to this continent. And there are the events, negative, positive, so, and I'm just giving you my perspective about the issues. I have had many careers and very interesting. When I get bored, I just say, the hell with it. I got my master's degree in counseling psychology in 74 and 75, 76, developed the counseling concept of 3 C's. And the most important that today I'm still very much in use is the cultural sphere. Because when I'm growing up in a house in Brazil that we have multiple languages, in one room, we immigrated in 62. And I was born in Shanghai in 48, moved to Macau in 52, left Macau in 62, studied with the Salesians, baptized by the Jesuits of the Matteo Ricci School. In the coming weeks, months, Matteo Ricci's name will surface, and I'll be doing a great deal more of the research work on this Jesuit priest when he said, these Chinese do not need to be evangelized. In that particular time, it's very, very controversial, because that was his observation. In this entire I draw a timeline. How did the West expand above and beyond of the Europe? 1492, which is the famous Spanish Inquisition. But let us remind everybody else, this sounds a very prejudicial, very racial, of the very harsh Spanish Inquisition, with the people burning in the bonfires. But 100 years before that, the Spanish Catholic king and queen taken over Granada in the Andalusia in the southern region, they were giving 100 years before the warning to the Arab Spanish and the Jewish Spanish that they will have to convert. By all means, I'm not endorsing the fortification that everybody had to be following the Roman Catholic order. But it was that time, that period. But since 1492, Columbus landed in America. And from that point onward, just another bit of history to your interest, all the entire expeditions, so be that from Spanish or from Portugal, all the navigators were all Portuguese. and you will find this to be controversial because Columbus was never Italian. He never spoke Italian. Columbus, when he landed in Cuba, he named Cuba, and also all the peripheral cities or the islands is all under many names of saint. If you look back by various Portuguese international scholars, Columbus was himself born in a town, the only other town in the world named Cuba, in the region called Alentejo, and he is a child from the Count or Duke of Beja. And then his mother is a converted Jewish family, the last name Zarco, Z-A-R-C-O. The Zarco family, his grandfather was one of the earliest pioneers, explorer who discovered the island of Madeira. So in this, and then after Columbus, and in between that time, we have Vasco da Gama, who turned Cape in the African Cape and gone into Asia to Calcutta, eventually into the China area. And the third navigator who have just found Brazil in 1500s. That's Pedro Álvares Cabral. I know very well because I came here in Brazil. And the fourth, 20 years later, in that time gap, Magellan, for us who are Luso, Portuguese, Spanish, his real name is Fernand Magalhães. He's another Portuguese navigator. They all came from the Portuguese naval school or the navigation school, the Prince Henry, relating to the time and period of King John. So by this situation of Columbus, when he found Cuba, when he landed in the island of Hispaniola, today's Dominican Republic, and Haiti, when he first got back, he spent his first 2 weeks in Portugal, in Lisbon, Lisboa, with King João. It's a little bit gossipy in this format, but it just tells you, in my perception, history is what history we learn from. And there are other sides of the story and storytelling about history. And same thing here. The important point I'm trying to get at, how fast in those 3 voyages, be that Columbus landed into the Caribbean region, and Vasco da Gama had turned the Cape and went into Asia, and 1500, Pedro Álvares Cabral found Brazil. But in between these 3 trips, when the Spanish and Portuguese were disputing, wanted clarification of their land and their voyages beyond Europe, they all have gone to the Pope. I trust it's Borgia, the origin from Spain, with their biases. Again, all these multicultural ethnic groups, and also much of the voyage from Columbus were funded also at that time by the ethnic Jewish merchants in both Spain and Italy, because the Pope opened up the region almost like in Spain, what they call the Juderia, is the Jewish region in Toledo, in different regions. And in this particular detail, that every trip that Columbus made in this development, that was the assignment by the Pope, have decided to put a treaty in the midst of the Atlantic. And that treaty is called Tordesillas. In Portuguese, LHA at the end, but in Spanish, it's Tordesillas, okay? Interesting enough, that was literally put in the middle of the ocean. The western part of the ocean belonged to Spain, because Spain already found, by Columbus, found the region of the Mesoamerica, the region of the Caribbean. And Portuguese already landed into African coast. The Portuguese actually been navigating. They found the Canary Islands, and they're going down the African coast. Even at that time, by 1460, around that time, in Ghana, the Portuguese already crossed over to Brazil, knew Brazil exists, and they traveling through a middle island, an island called Tristan da Cunha, which happened when I was 14, 1962. Our ship stopped in the middle of the Atlantic, rescued 3 British scientists, and then before we went onward to Rio de Janeiro and then Santos. That's how we landed into Brazil. But just to talk about the importance of this treaty, Tordesillas or Tordesillas, and the Portuguese fought it. Again, I'm not accurate on the sea league counting, but what they asking for the distance had granted Portuguese. They wanted not just the east of the Tordesillas, Africa. They wanted another 200 league or thereabouts. It's almost 1,500 kilometers, which including all of Brazil. I bring this up a little bit of intrigue, maybe a little bit the gossip in Portuguese. We call it fofoca. It's almost funny. A little bit of the controversy of the time, the discovery, by telling when the European, how they expanded, how they went west. That is just one part of the story that you all can explore. Hopefully, eventually there'll be more insert, more input and comment about the discovery. But the next point is, after this, Iberian, 2 global powers has started discovery of America. And then the next wave of the expansion, global expansion, came the British. And by the Industrial Revolution and by the power of steam engine, they basically plow over India, colonized India in the 1700s and 1800s, giving China the 100-year humiliation of the Opium Holocaust. We can call it Holocaust. We can call it even in a different kind of expression about that. And that Holocaust situation had caused the Chinese diaspora. And here this comes a lot of lack of clarity. The Chinese were leaving the northern part of China ever since the Mongol invaded China, and in Chinese, they name it Yuan. Why do these nomadic groups, when they once they got into the region, the center or in the middle of the China between 2 rivers, Yellow and Yangtze. It's funny because this is how one of the proven records of the Chinese written language starting in Shang Dynasty, which is almost 3,300 years. Shang Dynasty is known for the oracle bones. Another part of the history most Western do not know is where during the Shang Dynasty's 600 years, they have continued a very high ritual of human sacrifices. And talk about Confucius had always advocating his teaching, the demeanor, the mannerism, the engagement, the ceremonial, the rituals of the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou people at one time were dominated by the Shang dynasty, but they were the one who were controlled to capture other tribes in the northwest from their region. They were located northwest from the dynasty of the Shang. And I want this point clear because per my research and other works, the cannibalism of the Shang on the ritual and the cannibalism, and based my early research and by researching what other tribes and cannibalism, yes, there were cannibalism in the Papua New Guinea, in the mid-range of the ocean. I'm just trying to make this fun, imaginative, and in association with the cannibalism, a human sacrifice. And also, let me be very clear, the Shang rituals and the cannibalism is not they are eating the entire body. They're only cooked the human heads and offering to the deity. In this particular rituals of human sacrifices, in part, cannibalism with the human heads, I am just imagining, thinking about the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Olmecs. With other rumor mills, by saying that I had my time also offer engagement, joint research with Gavin Menzies, who wrote the book British Sailor, 1492, the year trying to discover America. Of course, I'm friends with the group. Jan Husson also is a Portuguese fluent researcher. Now is the director of the 1421 in London. But what this issue is coming to my head is about they have found big stones, anchors along the coast of Mexico. Now this become very interesting because I myself was a diver, scuba diver, snorkeling. I've always enjoyed my underwater activities and fun, including diving in the Amazons. But this is what I'm trying to make this part of an open book issue, because subject and topics that we are talking now, I might be inviting, or other people will find, hey, I have an echo. Oh, I got a similar idea. So this can be eventually, by discovering the Shang dynasty, the human sacrificing, insofar about the cannibalism parts, it's only the human heads were cooked into the urns made of bronze. So make that with this one part of sidetrack of the overall issue before I get to the Americans and Bruce Lee and my issue here. Again, history is about bits and pieces. And let me emphasize one more time, what is a spatial web coming in the future? We're actually now in this spatial web right now. Because if you look back to the history, you look back to this part of history of the European expansion into Asia, with England dominated the India and also eventually China. By 1800, China and India have 3/4 of the global wealth. I'm not going to pinpoint what is what, because the big data is with us. There will be more research coming out, but I just want to let those who are curious about history, both the British and the Americans had profited from the opium trade. At that time in point, the Americans were very quiet, not very proud of the opium trade. They call it China trade. And just mention three of the families that I know. There will be others. Everybody know about the Roosevelt family, Delano Roosevelt, Delano Russell. Their wealth came from opium. Another one is the Forbes magazine, Forbes family. And the third one is Quiet Astor. They're all from the East Coast. If you look at the Harvard, Yale, Brown, I just mentioned three, the others, most of the American Ivy League colleges were funded by the opium trade. That's one. So from this perspective, the West had dominated. Eventually, you talk about Teddy Roosevelt, who started the war with the Spanish in Cuba. When Cuba, he took Guam, he took Puerto Rico, and eventually the Philippines. Okay, which Philippines is where Magellan landed into Manila. In fact, there was another Silk Road trade between Manila, Mexico to Spain. That's called the mantilla, the manta ray. Manta is the ray fish, right? And then the Spanish women using the silk embroidered mantilla to cover face, going to church, cover the head on the shoulder. Though there's another worthwhile research of the interaction of the ethnic Chinese in Philippines and from Philippines into Mexico, from Mexico crossing the Veracruz back to the Atlantic Ocean and gone on to Spain. That will be another story that we can all jointly explore. But back to the story issues about Bruce Lee, about the Chinese coming into the area of the gold rush, and then eventually on the railroad. The movie we watch on Netflix about the warrior, about this Japanese British actor who played the part of the major character, the martial art, that everybody's impressed. And what I'm trying to find out, just from a limited angle and from my point of view, that one of the major discrepancy, just speaking of this particular footage, is where the Chinese and their engagement beyond the manipulation of the city management. As a matter of fact, the glory of Stanford University, the Stanford property, was part of the real system, and the talk about exploitation of the Chinese and whatnot. But that's another story of the land law that you can all explore. But what I trying to highlight, the two different cultural differences between the Irish and this situation of the Irish, the railroad workers before the railroad. Those were the conditions in San Francisco versus the Chinese. First, the Irish came to the U.S. because of the potato famine. Many came to stay. Many came to make a new life. So they already have a settlement mentality in North America. And of course, they have the unions. They also want their wages to improve the conditions, can make more money. Instead, the Chinese came. Here's it's a huge difference. And this again in bits and pieces, because I know the people who speak Cantonese, and other people in that era and time, even today, a large presence of the ethnic group within the province of Guangdong or Canton is the Toisan, the people from that province and from the region. And there are stories where I have my engagement with the museums here in Chicago, with Milwaukee, with the Chinese community, with my friends, American-born Chinese, who are also involving in various presentations about how these Chinese came to America. And here are some of just a few very short notes. Many of the Chinese came mainly were partially almost sold to the Americas. They came because of gold rush. They came because there's employment. They came because China, in that particular time and point, was poor. There were famine. There are not enough mouth to be fed. Many of these young Chinese had come with the conditions very different than the normal migration. One that's just a real short aspect. Many of them may not come because they don't have a relative linkage to the Chinese in America. So there is a period they changing their name, and there's a cost, there's a fee. They change it from a Wong to a family Moy. Moy, M-O-Y, is a big name in Chicago. So many of these Chinese came with one single purpose. They came to work hard, not knowing what time and year. The minute they have accumulated enough with the currency and the gold discrepancy and whatnot, they want to go back. And all these Chinese came with a cultural attachment that if they died, they want to send back to China. As we've seen in this particular movie, this footage, there were the obligations of this gang, these tongs, the fighting, and they fulfill part of that gap, meeting the demand of the Chinese community. And here's the two different ethnic groups in conflict: the Irish and the Chinese. I know there's hundreds, if not thousands, of stories to be told. I'm more impressed with Bruce Lee's daughter, as I have with my children who are half American, half Chinese. And we can dissect even my children's heritage can be quarter Italian, quarter English, maybe Irish, and half Chinese. But the movie was produced not just the wonderful, the martial arts, the high kicks, and the combination of Bruce Lee's Taekwondo and whatnot. But what I think is good in a way that more story have now been told from a perspective of the American Chinese. Again, in Tubular, I'm talking about the spatial web is going to allow us to see all past and future issues in the, I call this tubular, maybe from 186 linguistic groups to look at the issue. How did the Hungarian look at this issue? How did the Czech look at this issue? How did the Romanians, who's one of the 5 branches of the Romance languages, as I created also a linguistic group to help Chinese in the world, called it Romantina, Roman Latino. Remember, the Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, Romanian, they were all at one time, when they developed the language, at the end of the Roman Empire, they call those lingua vulgar, or vulgar language, but not in a vulgar, the way we express it. They don't speak perfect Latin, or we can speak in Pidgin English, or the Hawaiian, the way they speak, or in the not too long ago, the American Black and their expressions on their slang, on their localization of the language. But what is wonderful in the development of this Romantina project is just a totally licensed, because you put I repeat, easy to use this sound called if I translated Chinese to English, like train station, but the word station in Spanish, estación, and the word in French, estación, almost identical. And in Portuguese is estação with the nasal. And in Italian, estazione. Okay, so what I'm trying to do, China's already have over 600 million Chinese engaged in English. And just take a percentage of their 600 million, maybe 100 million, now into the language for Europe with the Chinese business expansion into Europe. So I want to do this dictionary in graphic, visual, along with sound, in part adapting, sharing with the Google Translate in the future. So you take one word English, Chinese to English. From English, when you push Romantina, you will come up with the 4 languages. And then all the sound, Latin Roman sound language will come up to it. Even Romanian. But don't forget, there's other sub languages like the Galicians, Gallegos. We speak a language between Portuguese and Spanish. And then in the islands in Corsica, Sardinia, or the other sub-dialects of the Italian can be falling into. So in other words, you learn one word, English, Chinese English, boom, you push Romantina, you get 6 language coming after. And the rest is connecting the grammar. I can handle Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. Basically, it's because my fluency in Portuguese and my learning in Latin, with all the grammatical structures, accusative, dative, direct, indirect object, prefix, suffix, radical. So you put your word together. So in this In this format, the world we're coming into a much more the general 360-degree vision to the issues today, the issues of tomorrow, and the issues of past. In my use of ChatGPT, why my wife and I have watched for 1 week on the American West stories and the story about the Lakota Indians and the Cheyennes with the Little Big Horn with Custer. And I just cannot believe reading with all this. To my own chagrin, I'm finding out the mass killing of the bisons. It was a direct federal order by the President Ulysses Grant and by his military second in command, Sherman. And because of that episode, I went back to look more at the history of President Grant. And I look at all his past war tactics from Vicksburg all the way to his final defeat of Lee. His overall tactics is to cut off food, water supply, and straddle the enemies and weakening the enemies. And I'm just totally shocked. First, Ulysses Grant promised the Cheyennes, the Lakotas, not to touch the part of the Black Hill where they considered the Holy Land. But once they found gold, once the white settlers coming into the region, maybe then the government have lost control of this gold rushing. I can see that eventually in California and in our Brazil, where the famous story about Serra Pelada, how many hundreds of thousands of gold diggers rushing into less than a 10-acre area and totally pillage. It was phenomenal. This is the human, again, it's a human dynamics. I'm not here to fault any government, but I can see how that agreement with the natives were canceled. So when Custer, not knowing how many thousands of natives in the Little Bighorn, and more than that, and by the trading of the booze, liquor, and whatnot, the Cheyenne, the Lakotas, the Arapahos, they were having repeat Winchester rifles, far more sophisticated than the team of Custer. But all in all, for those of us who are newcomers, we are not the native-born Americans. We even have to study much more about the American history and highlighting what we can improve, what we can have input. Even at this time and moment, the issue between China and US is extremely uncomfortable for those of us who are ethnic Chinese. But in the case, just repeat these little short observations about the American Chinese and their how they get settled in the West Coast with the gold rush, with the railroad, so on and so forth. And also, I am at a time in 1974, 77, 92. I took on a year to become a part-time actor, and I become good. I make a couple very good earnings. And one episode doing a commercial for Ulster Electric Walk. Just for the one presentation, I earned $9,000 with the residuals, and I become a Screen Actors Guild. So I can make my association with the acting community And I can also see that many fun idiosyncrasy in the film industry, mainly in Chicago. The Chicago Art Museum. I did for United Airlines as a pilot. I did a few other acting work, where I also have read the work of Bruce Lee had continued by his daughter, which I'm highlighting at this time and moment. Bruce Lee was a fantastic fighter, and he creating his own hybrid of style. He started with Wing Chun, Cantonese, his father, his grandparent, and then his association with the Yip Man, the master who taught him. Wing Chun, we call it in Chinese Lam Kun Bak Tui, the southern fist and the northern legs. Most American know about his Taekwondo. It's about the Taekwondo from Korea. But there was always had long ago happened with the Chinese in the school of martial arts, in a different discipline of martial arts. So northern legs and southern fist, and Bruce Lee had managed to incorporate in this hybrid of arts, and one of the issues from the community of Hollywood now, I'm making myself with another gentleman, Chan, who have a little bit of a bitterness. He was not become the martial art coordinator trainer for the movie Kung Fu. Instead, they hire another non-Chinese, just like Charlie Chan, just in the Kung Fu series. And why Bruce Lee was invited to become the character in Green Hornet. One episode that very much commented by the Hollywood community, ethnic Chinese, that the Hollywood producers, directors decided we cannot let an Asian kicking the faces of white men. Even the white men were villains. That's why they put a mask onto the Green Hornet. And for that reason or not, if I'm wrong, I know there will be other criticism comment about this. That is what eventually motivated Bruce Lee to head back to Hong Kong and created the Enter the Dragon. Now, this is not Bruce Lee alone. That's only the Chinese aspect I'm talking about. I am saluting, I'm greeting the work, and the producer, his daughter, had carried on a certain message of the Chinese development, Chinese community in North America. But who can talk about the fantastic spaghetti Western also outplayed our American Western when Clint Eastwood went to Italy to become the superstar. This is just opportunity created by other ethnic groups and by another group of producers, directors, and this is, even I have gone around a very, very round way to speak of what I think the influence and the work of Bruce Lee, and now his daughter had made such an impact. And still, in bits and pieces, is sensationalism, is all the kicking, all the fighting skills. Is still, we're impressed by action, by motion, as we all have done in our childhood, And so, one more comment about the hybrid of martial arts. Recently, we just saw more and more the Chinese engagement with the Brazilian, another fight of arts, capoeira. And for the longest time, and this linked to another cultural group, how the Brazilian fighting style, and it was not fighting at all. This will link us in the future, now coming up, the whole learning about capoeira. which in another language is called Angola. Well, we all know where Angola is. And if you're going further into the Angola, in the mouth of the Congo River, where the French Congo and the Portuguese Angola, but the original tribe in the same region all share the same language. By my travel, by my engagement and arguments with many, many multi-ethnic teams and groups, the French people that I had met wanted to take capoeira as part of the development of this fight with the lakes in the French region they call Savate. And in another comment earlier, in Brazil, I was told these capoeira, starting with music or fight, because they play with an instrument called berimbau, only 2 strings, and the rhythm. It was a dance. It was a movement. Okay. In fact, somebody even commented the movement of the capoeira is almost moving like a crab, sideways, open arms. But in the Savate, they do not allow, or the same French colonialism or the Portuguese, that the slaves were not allowed to fight with their hands. And for a lot of reasons, it comes to economic, that slaves were costly eventually. They could not afford to have slaves hurting each other. But in any other given time, this kind of the lick fighting for the gamblers who tied blades, like almost fighting like rooster fighting. They tie blades into their toes so they can show more of the combat and very sanguine in this fighting. But the capoeira is the movement. When you don't know it, I thought it was a dance. But when you're coming to the full movement of the kicks, they're much more like a windmill, like a roundhouse kick. And it can be very, very powerful, very damaging. And I'm just happy to make this comment. So another hybrid of culture between the Chinese martial arts, Taekwondo, the Northern Lakes, now we have the capoeira. And yes, capoeiras, according to another comments between the Brazilians and the, when other people watching them, they don't like the fight, they do that as a dance. They rehearse, they run over. It's just, capoeira can be a musical artist form of dance movement, and then can also be the very lethal weaponizing their legs to a full fight. So I want to limit my talk no more than an hour. So we talk about Bruce Lee, we talk about the warriors, and we talk about the spirit of the Chinese, the migration of the Chinese. They came, they have no intention to stay. They came, they want to go back. They have no grasp of the political situation of the Irish migrants or any other migrants. They migrate, they came, they stay. And this migrant coming in just a temporary to make enough money to feed their family, to feed their immediate family, and to support their parents. These are 2 different missions. Maybe this had not the chance to show in our society and the subculture of the migrants and their purpose coming into the situation. So we are still making movies. And just to add one last thing, chop suey was invented during the gold rush. Bully American walk into the Chinese camps, demand food, and Chinese said everything is sold out. They have nothing, and then they still demand food. So they put up all the leftovers. Chop is mixed. Soy is shredded. shredding the leftovers to create a meal just to please the bullies. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just thinking this is very funny in how many sets of circumstances food have produced, and chop suey become something that only for the Americans, even today. But I hope this multicultural exposure and commenting about fights, about the Northern Lakes and Southern Fist, and then the Bruce Lee's moving not backward, moving back into Hong Kong, then to have created his many martial arts movies. And today, the martial arts academies in North America are doing well. And I hope to share with you in the future of another comment about multicultural, cross-cultural, our experiences. And in a good form, sometimes maybe not in a very positive form, but this kind of a cultural issues can be giving us all a better exposure and a better understanding. Thank you for your time. Gustavo, I think saya para almost